The Pittsburgh Steelers have just made many roster changes to this team, and that involves cutting 11 players from this roster after the last preseason game against the Carolina Panthers yesterday. But first, before I get more into who those players are, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn notifications for everything Pittsburgh Steelers news and updates. Also like this video. Now, let's get right back into it. So, it's about time. The Pittsburgh Steelers are going to start making some changes to this roster to try trimming it to 53 people, because that's what the limit is going into the regular season. And now with the preseason over, they have to start doing this thing quickly. And that involved cutting 11 players from this roster today. So let's get into it. Who are those players and why were they cut? So looking at the players, they have cut long snapper Jake McQuaide, edge rusher Kenny Willekes, defensive back Cam Alexander, defensive back Quindell Johnson, defensive back Kyler McMichael, defensive back Mikey Victor, offensive tackle Julian Pearl, offensive lineman Doug Nestor, quarterback Logan Woodside, running back Evan Hull, and tight end Kevin Foelsch. So those are the 11 players the Pittsburgh Steelers have decided to release from this roster at the first set of cutdowns. So there's going to be many more people cut in the coming days, but for now, this is who the Pittsburgh Steelers have decided on. The other players that are going to be released in a later date, they probably have to think more about, and these were the easiest ones to get rid of right away. So the most notable release out of this group is probably long snapper Jake McQuaide, and that is who they basically just signed earlier in this week. And they signed him because long snapper Christian Kuntz got injured in the second preseason game, and it's up in the air if he'll be ready to go by week 1. So that one's interesting because now they have no other long snapper on this roster, and hopefully Christian Kuntz comes back, or else they may have to go out and get someone else or use a different player that's on the team. So looking at the other players who were released, Woodside, for example, wasn't added as an extra quarterback depth after the team lost quarterback Will Howard in training camp due to an injury. He failed to stand out in any of the preseason games. He was kind of just average, and especially for a fourth quarterback on this roster, you're going to have to make an impact and make an impact right away. But no, the Pittsburgh Steelers didn't see the impact. He didn't make it, and they released him. Can he be back on this practice squad, however? Yes. I do believe that they usually carry a quarterback on their practice squad, so he can be a guy who comes there. Now, looking at some other players that they cut, for example, Alexander. He was released by the team today, and he was signed after being released by the Los Angeles Rams earlier this week. He was added due to depth. The Pittsburgh Steelers needed another defensive back during the preseason, so he had a hard chance to make this roster to begin with because he was just added earlier in the week. Obviously, he didn't stand out enough, and he's now gone off of this team as well. The team also cut Willekes, and they added him for defensive line depth as well earlier in the week. So he had a hard chance of making this team too because he wasn't here for all of camp. So he was also released. Pearl is another one. He was added this week for depth for this week's game against the Panthers. Didn't stand out enough. Obviously, the Steelers have good line depth right now on their team. They know who their starters are going to be. They know who their backups are going to be. So he basically had no chance to make this roster as well. So those are some players and why they got released. Now looking at some others, for example, Hull, the running back. He got outplayed by running backs Trey Sermon and Lou Nichols. So it makes sense why he was cut on the first group of cut downs, because the Pittsburgh Steelers obviously saw more from other guys and not so Hull. So he can be back to the practice squad, however, but even that is up in the air. So, going through some of the other guys, it is notable that the team is keeping safety Sebastian Castro over Johnson. Both seem to be competing for a practice squad spot, but with Johnson involved in the first round of cuts, it might be more likely the team looks to keep Castro. And obviously, as a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, we know he can be versatile and move into a linebacker role. So he's a player who has versatility, and we know Mike Tomlin loves that. So at the next cut downs, he can be released, but obviously in terms of who's going to make the practice squad, obviously it looks like Sebastian Castro has the edge over Johnson, who was released in the first cuts. Looking at McMichael. he struggled throughout training camp and even the preseason as well, so it makes sense why he was released from this roster. And while Victor was depth for training camp and the preseason, he's also released as well. Victor was signed not too long ago, so he didn't really have the full offseason workload in order to make this team compared to some other guys. So it makes sense as to why he is now gone as well. So, looking at all these cuts in general, this now leaves the Pittsburgh Steelers roster down to 80 players. The team will need to clear 27 more spots to get their roster down by 53 men by Tuesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. So, not all 27 spots will come via cuts, as the team has some candidates to go kind of on injured reserve, meaning that they will go on that list and then some other players will make this roster instead, so they don't need to cut everybody from that 27 people. They can move stuff around, and just for example, if Will Howard goes on IR, they can keep Skylar Thompson, and they won't have to cut him. We know the Pittsburgh Steelers usually keep 3 quarterbacks on this roster, and with Will Howard and Skylar Thompson both on this team, that would leave 4, so 1 may go on IR. So just to kind of give you an idea, based off that number, 27, not all of them will be released. Also, this obviously means that other teams around the NFL are also cutting players from their team, and there's always some unexpected players who get cuts, and that the Steelers may look at and be like, hey, that's a good player, that's a solid fit for our team. So we may sign that player from your roster cutdowns to our team. And same thing for other teams. Some teams will look at the Steelers players that they cut and be like, hey, we could use a guy like that. Use a guy who's tough, been in those AFC North battles, and we want him on our team. So expect people to go flying around from roster to roster here within the next few days. But for right now, this is where the roster stands for the Pittsburgh Steelers and what they've decided to do. Also, in the coming days, I would say on Sunday, I'm going to do a depth chart in terms of who I believe the Pittsburgh Steelers will list on their initial depth chart and who will make this initial 53-man roster. So make sure you stay tuned for that. And turn on notifications for this channel and subscribe so you don't miss it. Also, just kind of recapping this video in general, these players, obviously, some Steelers fans feel a connection to them because they've been around this entire offseason and we've been following these players since they got signed. I know I've done an introduction to all these players that the Pittsburgh Steelers have added. It doesn't matter how late they've been added to the team, there's still introduction to them. They've participated in training camp. Fans get to go see them compete, and some fans even grow attached to a player in terms of, hey, I hope that guy makes our team. He's been fighting, he's been performing, he's been showing out. Hopefully he makes our team, and then some of these guys will get cut. So it's kind of a sad thing, but at the end of the day, this is just business in the NFL. Some guys have a bigger name, some guys have more experience, so they're kept even though some other guys are showing out. For example, Rock Taylor. He's a player who was released by the Pittsburgh Steelers last week, and I know many Steelers fans wanted to see him on this team, even if that means the practice squad. But no, as of right now, he's not on the roster because he was released. He showed out during training camp. He played really good in preseason as well. Some people were sad to see him go, especially because they believe that he could be the next good wide receiver in this league, even though he was undrafted this free agency and draft period. So that's for example, but it's a sad day for these players getting cut, but now they have to find a different team and find their way back into the NFL at any level, even if that means the practice squad. So that does it for this video, but let me know your thoughts down in the comments below on that topic. Are you sad to see any of these players get cut from this team who you thought actually had made a chance to make this roster? Or do you believe, like I believe, at this set of cutdowns, most of these guys, you expected them to get cut from this team? The only person who may be a question mark was the long snapper, Jake McQuaide. But let me know your thoughts down in the comments below on this video and the cuts. Also, who else on this roster would you like to see and not get cut in the coming days? But anyway, that's it for me. That's in this video. So make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn notifications for everything Pittsburgh Steelers news, updates, highlights, analysis reports. This is the best spot for all Pittsburgh Steelers football coverage. So stay tuned. And until the next video tomorrow, I'll see you guys all later. That's it for me. I'm out. Peace.